Hey dude, it's Casey. Welcome to today's video. Today I'm doing something a bit different. I've not uploaded anything for 2 weeks. I have been offline educating myself pretty much. So this is what today's video is about, is why Black Lives Matter is important for white people. There's no one answer I can give, but I'm just sort of going to give my thoughts on it because it's really important. I think it's also important to know that you shouldn't be supporting Black Lives Matter if you just want praise and recognition from it. The past 2 weeks I've been on Twitter trying my best to stay up to date with not only protests but Black people's stories on police brutality and their everyday lives, and petitions I've been trying to keep up to date to sign with. And I'll link below some things in the description that you can check out for some further reading or some petitions that still need signing. But it's just been very overwhelming the past 2 weeks for me personally, not that it has been for everyone. I think my job's also just changed with the hours I work, so it's very exhausting. My body is getting used to a sleeping pattern that it was forced into for 4 years, and now my body's fighting against this new one that I have to get used to, and it's just been very exhausting. But it's I want to say liberating for me to start learning actual history about some things. I can't speak on behalf of other people. I will never ever speak on behalf of a Black person. Never. I will only ever speak on behalf of myself. I will only talk my own opinions and my takeaway of literature that I might read. But it has been so eye-opening. It's been hard to swallow a lot of the history of not only America but the UK and Australia. I was definitely a hypocrite in the beginning of this Black Lives Matter movement after George Floyd's unfortunate murder. I was such a hypocrite because I went straight into learning and educating myself on American Black lives and their history and the culture and the racism and the slavery and everything. And I sort of had a wake-up call when protests started in Australia for the Black Lives Matter movement. But the Black Lives Matter protests in Australia are about the First Nations, or the Aboriginal people here in Australia. They are the people that we are protesting for. As well as obviously other Black people, brown, other people of colour, but they are our priority. As an Australian, it's our priority right now is to protest for the First Nations people that we slaughtered and enslaved. Our Prime Minister recently said that slavery didn't happen in Australia. He's never fucking read a book in his life. I think you don't even have to read a book to put two and two together that when Australia was settled, they imprisoned all of these Aboriginal people, all of these tribes that they killed, they pillaged, they murdered, and they raped Aboriginal women so they could whitewash their children, and slowly they could breed out the blackness is what they were after. It doesn't take a fucking scientist to also know that there was definitely slavery when all of that was happening. Aboriginal men and women were being enslaved, forced labour with no pay while this was all happening. You don't have to be a genius to just assume that that's what happened. So yeah, I was being hypocritical because I was ignorant to it. I didn't ignore it. I was just ignorant. I didn't realize. I mean, I did. I just wasn't ready to face my own history. It's easier to face another country's history, someone else's history, because you feel removed from it. It's easy to have an opinion on another country's history. It's easy to go, oh, well, yeah, obviously that was wrong. It's easier to judge another country on how they reacted to something and how they acted and how they treated people than it is to do with your own country. And it is very shameful knowing your history and knowing that not a lot has been done for the First Nations people of Australia. They've been apologised to for the stolen generation, and that's it. They've been given an apology by a Prime Minister, and that's it. They haven't been acknowledged in a way that actually helps them. It's hard to learn things about your country that only happened like 100, 200 years ago. Not even that. A lot of shit is so recent, like being able to enter the workforce. Like it just astounds me that things from until like 1970, 1980, there were still things illegal that a black man can't do in Australia. It just makes me sad. And it makes me mad that we aren't taught any of this stuff in school. I mean, each school is different, obviously. Some schools do teach a more extensive history of certain things, but there's no... I only had like one tiny little piece of Indigenous culture taught to me in primary school, and one tiny little piece of the settlers coming to Australia in high school, and that was it. That's all we're taught. We need more education on it from a younger age. Educating yourself now is the best thing you can do. But please, I implore you, like, email the leaders in your area, email the schools in your area. I don't know what to do, but I want to do something. I want them to change the curriculum so that includes more and extensive Aboriginal First Nations history. We need to know as much about them as we can. They're the oldest civilization on Earth, as far as I'm aware, so far. They came to Australia, 60,000 years ago it was? I wouldn't have known that as a kid. I just thought that they had always been here. It's so interesting. I don't know why we're not taught these things. The same with all the statues that people are tearing down. Why were they up in the first place? Because those men, I can tell you why. It's because those men, the statues that are off, those men donated, or they were so influential to certain white people that they either erased some of their really bad history, or that people that put it up just didn't give a fuck. They didn't care about their history. They just saw this money or this influence and put it up, and it's disgusting. Bringing them down, tearing them down is what's right. Put them in museums instead. Their names are still in history books. People will still learn about them. But it goes to show how much we aren't taught, or how little people remember. I don't think anyone was taught half the shit that those statues were in school, because people are only just now figuring out why they're being pulled down in the first place. Like, update your education in schools. Update that shit. Because then people are aware. You don't need fucking statues. Like, why the fuck do we need statues of people like that? Put people up who have actually done something good for the community. Something good. Something that people can't argue about. Something that isn't inherently evil, but people still love to argue was okay. Put up a statue of something good. If someone doing something good, it's not hard. I've not answered the question, why is BLM important for white people? I can't give you an answer. But for me, I feel like I've been lied to my whole life. And I just feel pain for the people that have to live in fear every fucking day. Literally 2 nights ago, I got pulled over by the police. I wasn't fearing for my life. I wasn't afraid. I just thought, okay, he's probably just going to do a breathalyzer, that's fine. Like, I have such a privilege that being pulled over by the people who are meant to protect us and do protect me, a white woman, I had no fear whatsoever. But because I was literally listening to a podcast while I was being pulled over, while on my drive home from work. And it's Emma Watson. She was reading the first chapter of Rennie Lodge, a black British woman. She wrote a book called Why I No Longer Talk to White People About Race. Read that book, please. I need to buy it. I need to buy the audiobook for it or something, because it is so good. But it's about the black British history of slavery and racism. And I was listening to that and I just thought, this is so ironic. I'm being pulled over by the police while I'm listening to this podcast. Like, it was like, it's like I'd been given this sign, like, this is your privilege in a nutshell. And I think that's why it's important. That's why Black Lives Matter is important. None of this is going to make sense. I feel like when I edit it, nothing is going to make sense of what I'm trying to put together. But I actually saw this really cool quote. It's not a cool quote. From this article. I was just doing like a quick search. I'll link it in the description. It'll be the first link. So there's a part in the article called Killing with Kindness, Advice for White People. And so it says, outraged white people taking to Twitter could provide a comfort blanket that obscures the real issues. For example, there are no black people on the medical committees presiding over many COVID vaccine trials, even though they are disproportionately contracting and dying from the disease. Black people. If pharma companies don't include race in the trials, they won't produce vaccines that are equally effective for all people. If tech companies don't include race in algorithm and coding development, we will continue to produce driverless cars that bump into black people more than white people. If we don't tackle institutional police racism, we will continue to have disproportionate black deaths. Yeah, I didn't realize that there are no black people on the committees for these COVID vaccine trials. How are they supposed to know? Like, how... Yes, obviously there are people that can read studies. You don't have to be black to read a study. But being a black person gives you that already first-hand knowledge. COVID is disproportionately affecting black people more than white people. Why wouldn't there be a black person on these committees? It makes me mad. The reason that Black Lives Matter is a white person's problem as well is because it's a fucking human rights issue. That's why. After this video, after I post it, I'm making a promise to myself now. I'm going to do it on camera so that I don't have an excuse. Read more books on
your history first and then other countries' history. Please educate yourself, but actually talk to people in your community who are affected by this. Speak to Black people, speak to people of color, speak to the First Nations people of your country. Actually ask the people that are being affected by racism firsthand and from the slavery and the trickle effects of that slavery and why it's still an issue today. I don't have all the answers right now, but at some point I want to be able to answer questions from racist people who are trying to be snarky and smart. I want to be in a position where I can refute what they're saying with actual facts rather than with my personal feelings. I want to be able to be so anti-racist that no one in my immediate friends or family group is even close to being racist. I don't think any of them are now, but I need to be an anti-racist. Being not racist isn't enough right now for anyone, for you as well. It's not good enough to just not be racist. That doesn't make you a good person, it just makes you a general human being. We need to be anti-racist. That's more important. We need to call people out when they make racist remarks. I don't give a fuck if it's a joke or it's not. We need to be comfortable with calling people out, calling out our friends, calling out our family members. We need to be comfortable with calling out our colleagues. It doesn't matter. Being not racist isn't enough. We need to be anti-racist. So like I said before, the Black Lives Matter movement, it's important to white people because it's a human rights issue. Racism shouldn't exist today. It shouldn't. It shouldn't still be a thing. But thank fuck for phones. Thank fuck for cameras on phones. Can you imagine the world we would live in today? The fear Black people would have today if phones didn't exist or if cameras didn't exist on phones? And people saying, well, it's happening more often now than it was. No, we're just seeing it more often because people have access to phones. People have access to cameras more now. And therefore people have access to social media. It's not hard to realize that the reason we're seeing more isn't because there isn't more of it. It's because there's more of us on the streets, sick of seeing it and recording it. I'm going to stop talking now, but generally that's how I feel. It's everyone's problem to deal with it. But white people, please don't go looking for praise. Don't do it for virtue signaling. Like, just do it because you genuinely want to be an anti-racist, because you hate racism. Do it because you want to see a place where people that don't necessarily look like you can be treated like you. I want people to be treated the way that I get treated, with respect and with dignity and without fear. All because I have white skin. It's not fair that my people invaded the land I live in and killed millions of First Nations people, and yet I get treated better than they do. It's not fair, and it's not enough for them. So I will fight with them, and I will help educate others for them. It's not their job to educate everyone who's a racist piece of shit. Anyway, that's all I'm going to talk about today. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I get some more videos up soon. See you, dude.